Sure, I'll try.
Okay, but what we're gonna do is I would like you to sign up for credentialing, and Tanya's telling me it's view only. That's how my day is going. So give me 1 second, let me change it. Let's change that. So, okay, so what I'd like you to do is I would like you to claim one of those credentialing spots. Tanya, let me know if you can get in. Perfect. Okay, awesome. Everybody take a name. So what we're gonna do is you're going to log in to 2 of my courses. Now be careful, some of you are all trying to run at the same spot. So just grab a spot somewhere on that list. There's 80 sets of credentials. And what's gonna happen is on the very top of that page, you'll see where it says log in here. And I'm also gonna put this in the chat as well so you can find the login place. I think this experience is pretty powerful. I know it's going to take us a few minutes and it's going to take a large part of our time together, but I think you're going to see why and why this is so important. So you'll notice the login spot at the very top. It says login here, but everybody's going to get their own credentialing. Now, what's going to happen when you log into that site, and I'm going to let you help one another out in your small groups, you're only going to see 2 courses on your dashboard. You're going to see an algebra course that has a pretty tile, just like the screen you see in front of you. And you're going to see another algebra course. So algebra example A and algebra example B. What I would like you to do is I would like you to get into your small groups. I'm going to break you out in a few minutes. Someone drive the bus and share their screen and kind of give that experience to everyone else. And then I would like you to have a conversation about what is your anxiety level as you're working through those courses. What is your anxiety level? Just like Trent was talking about this morning. What is your anxiety level? And then come back. I'm going to bring you back. I'm going to give you a 60-second warning. There's other things I would like you to do while you're in there though. I would like you to take some notes as to like, is it easy to navigate? Do I know what I'm supposed to be doing? How do I contact my teacher if I need to? Some of those questions that Trenton alluded to earlier, I would like you to take this time to actually investigate and get into those courses and see if how you feel when you're going through. Okay, so I'm going to break you into groups. I'm going to have you have these small conversations with your people, and then I'm going to pull you back. Okay. Now it should be able to edit it. Go ahead and refresh your page if you need to. Okay. So I'm going to break you into groups. If you would accept your invitation in about 2 seconds. It's giving me 1 more second. Give me 1 more second. Okay. There you go, kids. So hopefully you see an invitation to accept your small breakout room. Investigate those 2 algebra courses, have a conversation, talk about your anxiety, and let's come back in about 5 minutes. Mark, can you give me a thumbs up and tell me if you can see my screen? Thank you. Okay, we're gonna give everybody just a few more seconds to get back with us. So I'm loving breakout rooms right now with these virtual trainings because I have the ability to push people out and bring them back together and send little messages along the way. So I'm hoping, okay, so how many of you, just give me a thumbs up, how many of you were able to see the two courses and you had a conversation with your group? Thumbs up. Okay, so here's what I'd like to know. We're gonna talk about, oh no, some people say they didn't see anything. I apologize. Well, we're gonna show you a little example. So there's two algebra courses you were supposed to investigate. The first one was Algebra A. So really quick, I wanna know if 0 was absolutely no anxiety whatsoever and 5 is I have the most anxiety, what would your anxiety level be? Go ahead and put it in the chat or use your fingers. 0 to 5, what did you have? Lots of 4s and 5s, and I see some 5s hands. Exactly. You had no idea what you were supposed to do when you logged into this course, right? Some people went to this announcement and they might have seen that it said welcome back, and it tells them that they're supposed to look for an introduction page, but they don't even know where the introduction page is. And it causes this fear and stress of like, I have no idea where I'm supposed to go. And so this is an example of a course where they did not use modules and possibly just kind of jumped in. Now, if you tried to go to the calendar to see if there were any things associated with this course, so if you go ahead and turn on your Canvas calendar on the left-hand side, and you were to go in and maybe try to see when something was due. So if I just turned on my Algebra A calendar, sorry, I have to turn everything else off. You'll notice that there's really not even, it doesn't even tell us due dates. There's nothing there to see. And so this would be an example of a high stress situation that we really don't want our kids to be a part of. And I'm hoping you kind of got that. Okay, here's it, version B. Now I'm gonna go in as a student really quick. Version B, from 0 being no stress to 5 being high stress. What was your stress level with this one? I love it. 0, 1, 2, 1, yep, 0, 0, 0, 1, 2, I got a little bit. But notice how this is a huge, now some of you have maybe never used Canvas in your life, so there still might be a little bit of anxiety, right? But now notice that we are greeted by this space that not only kind of greets us and tells us there's an announcement at the top. You'll notice that we're given, if you scroll down this page, we're actually giving directions every day of the week what we're supposed to be doing every single day. The other thing you might have noticed is on the right-hand side, there are to-do dates or there are to-do things coming up that we know we are supposed to be doing. And on the very far left-hand side, you'll notice there is a very short menu. You only had 3 options. You really almost can't get lost because there's nowhere really to go. Jackie, I love it. She goes, we spent so much time trying to figure out course 1. We had very little time to explore course 2. And that's true because course 1 was a disaster and it was supposed to be a disaster. And I apologize. If we had more than 30 minutes, I would have given you more time. But this second example shows you how we've curated a space. We've reduced our left-hand navigation to only include a very few things. And one of those key things is modules. And so what we're going to do is talk a little bit about modules today and how this really should be the backbone of your course design. And this is an example. Now the content isn't necessarily like stellar, the most awesome content you'll ever see, but it truly today was for a structural point. Like you need to use modules so that everything is in one place. Okay, so let's talk just a little bit about what in the world is modules and what does that look like. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go back and forth. So here's kind of how I explain modules. I think about my Canvas course as my filing cabinet. So I'm a math teacher by trade. And when I was teaching math, I would think of my filing cabinet as my Canvas course. In my filing cabinet, I have a drawer that usually I would have files in, right? If some of you can relate to that. So what I encourage people to think about is like a file drawer is your course. So for example, Math 8 is one of my filing drawers. Algebra is one of my filing drawers. And within that drawer, if I was to pull out my algebra drawer and I was going to grab one of my manila folders that I taught, a chapter or a unit, that manila folder, that is your module. A module is really the container or the folder that you put all of your activities inside. That's really it. So when we think about modules, what we're thinking about is how can I put content that is all revolving around one topic or one unit into a space. And so that's what this Canvas module is today. Now we don't have time to talk like the intricate details about how do I actually add things to a module or how do I actually like create that content. In 30 minutes, we don't have that kind of time, but here's what we do want to talk about. First things first, if you are hearing me and you don't know anything about Canvas and you're brand new, here's what you need to hear. Everything should be built in modules. Modules, modules, modules. If you've heard me, how many of you have heard me say this before? Joan is like, so I apologize, my phone's ringing. But everything should be built in modules. It is where you can do everything in one space. Now in Canvas, you can choose to do things in all of those different tabs, but you don't need to do that. You can actually do all of it inside of a module space. So this is an example. This was my chapter 1 in my algebra class. This is what a module looks like. So you'll notice this is my heading, chapter 1, solving linear equations, and then all of my content pieces are inside of this space. So if we're talking about best practices in modules, here are some of the things that I just want to make sure that we kind of go into. Number 1, notice everything is in a module in this space. The second thing you'll notice is that there's some indentation and there's some structure things going on. So you'll see that I have a text header and then I have some things indented. And if you look really closely, do you notice anything? Give me something that you notice about this space in the chat. Just somebody give me something that they notice about this space.
The icons before your section.
You all say eyeballs, eyeballs. Yeah, so I added some eyeballs. So for me, for my students, this would be like eyeballs would indicate something you have to read or something you need to learn, right? Now, if you're a Mac user, this is the tip of the day. It's Command, Control, Spacebar. And that allows you to get those emojis. So I use the icons for my students to indicate that they need to learn something. And then I use the pencil to indicate that they need to do something. For me, doesn't have to be for you, but that's what I do. I love it that Sandra said consistency. If you look at this, notice lesson 1, instruction, my naming convention. That's what I wanted you to look at. Lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3. And inside of it, there is a consistent naming convention. Notice this says 1.1 instruction. What that means is lesson 1, that's chapter 1, lesson 1. Chapter 1, lesson 1. Chapter 1, lesson 2. Chapter 1, lesson 2. So I'm trying to create some consistency for kids by using a naming convention that works. I'm also using eyeballs that are consistent because we know consistency helps to reduce anxiety for students. Okay, anything else you notice in this space? So we've got naming convention. That's one of the best practices I would encourage you to use. Text headers, you'll notice I'm using these lesson 1 text header, lesson 2 text header, and then I indent things underneath. What other things do you notice in this space? Anybody?
Due date.
Yeah, so due dates is a huge one as well. You'll notice that from the module space, students can see when it's due and they have access from all of these other individual items. Okay, very good. Due dates and points, exactly right. Okay, so the question is, we're gonna give you the down and dirty 5-minute, how do I do this? And it's not gonna be very detailed. But number 1, always, always, always build in modules. So I would encourage you to build in the module space. To do so, up in the very top right-hand side, we have the ability to add a module. Now, I'm not doing this necessarily to show you, I'm gonna do chapter 2 really quick. I'm not doing this necessarily to show you the how-to, but I wanna show you all of the different things you can add to a module. So here's my chapter 2, solving inequalities. We're like going into the next unit. And when I'm looking at this space, I can add content on the right-hand side. Here's what I wanna show you in this space. We can add all sorts of different things to a module. So here's what I'd like to talk about for just a minute, is we have the ability to add all of these different types of items, okay? So for example, we can add a page. Now for those of you that are new to Canvas, a page is really just for content. It's like an instructional piece. You might have a page that, say for example, you made a video of your lesson and you're gonna put some text as far as the objectives that you're trying to reach during this lesson. And you're going to have maybe another Khan Academy video, or maybe you have a Padlet embedded. You can put all of those things in a page, but it's truly just for the student to read, observe, to learn from. We don't necessarily expect them to submit anything from that page. So that's one thing you can add to a module. The second thing you can add is an assignment. Now this would be, I'm giving you something to do, you complete it, and you turn it into me, right? So an assignment would be the second thing. The third thing we can add is a discussion. Now that would be, I'm gonna give us a prompt. Every single person sees everybody else's response. You don't have to think of the lame college, or I mean like when you were in master's 25 years ago, you can use discussions for so many cool things. So for little kids, I often think of kids sharing their video cameras and they're talking about, you know, their favorite book and why it's their favorite book. I've had art teachers use discussions for them to put their art projects in, like an art gallery. You can do all sorts of cool things with discussions, but remember, everybody sees everybody else's. And then you can use a quiz. So quizzes are truly just a question answer format. So I ask a question, my kids give me an answer. Now, if you're new, don't think of quizzes necessarily as some sort of formative or like a summative, like final kind of quiz. It could be that you're using it formatively. So maybe it's an exit ticket, or it's a bell ringer, or you're going to use it just to get a quick check of where kids are at. Okay. So those are the different types of things we can add into this module space. But if you look really close, there's a couple other things, and that one would be a text header. So text headers are really important for organization for students. We can also add external URLs, which are websites. So for example, if you want your kids to go to a Kahoot, that's a website. If you have a Nearpod lesson that you want to bring into your module, that's a website that you can bring in. So we have all of these different things that we can incorporate. And the last thing in our list is an external tool. And that, folks, would be maybe your Google Drive, or maybe this is your OneDrive. For a lot of my schools, they're using other tools like Kami. If you have maybe a Flipgrid integration, you can bring your Flipgrid in this space. But all of these things, assignments, quizzes, pages, discussions, all of those things can be wrapped up and put into a folder that we call a module. So students only have to go to one place to access all of those items. And we like to organize that by unit. So this is a chapter 1 module. That's what you should have saw through there. Okay, I see some of you feverishly writing notes. Do you know you can have this presentation too when we're done? Okay, so a couple other things. So best practice, number 1, build in modules. Number 2, use a naming convention that is descriptive and consistent. So Sandra said in the chat, she said it's consistent. Notice that I have a very consistent structure. I have a consistent naming experience. 1.1 means chapter 1, lesson 1. 1.2 means chapter 1, lesson 2. Take a gander. What if we were in chapter 5, lesson 3? What would it be named? Chat, anybody? Chapter 5, lesson 3, what would the naming convention be? What would be that? What would I use for that? I don't know. 5.3, thanks Amanda. Yeah, so 5.3, we would be on that same consistent train, and kids know what to expect if we are on that train, right? The third thing I would encourage you to do, and some of you are like, I haven't even started yet, but another thing that I would encourage you to do is if you go to the very beginning of your chapter. So this is my chapter 1 introduction. Another best practice is always to have a beginning page and an ending page. Now you might not understand why would I need a start and a finish, and here's why. Kids oftentimes will come to the beginning of a module, just like this, chapter 1 introduction, here's my learning goals. And then instead of going back to the module space, what they do is they go to the bottom and they press next. And then they read their instruction, they go to the bottom and they press next. And before we knew it, those poor kids have nexted themselves into chapter 4, right? So if we're still in chapter 1 and they're going to the bottom and they're working through the content, maybe they're working ahead and they're pressing next and they're just continually pressing next. This is what kids do, by the way. And they're going through the content. So now we're already in lesson 3, and maybe they're cruising and you don't care when they get through stuff and they're pressing next. And now we're to the assessment and we're still pressing next. And that poor kid's gonna be in chapter 5, except for wait, I have an ending page. So best practice would always tell you have a beginning page, so a chapter introduction page, and maybe have a chapter ending page so that it's kind of a bookends for your modules. That's very important as well. So bookend your modules with a beginning and an end. That would be another best practice. So I'm going to reiterate what we showed you here. Number 1, build everything in modules. Number 2, naming convention that is consistent and descriptive. Number 3, I would encourage you to use text headers. Notice I have text headers and indentation for kids that is drawing your eyes to where they need to go next. Number 4, when I'm building modules, I always encourage my teachers to use a beginning page and an ending page. And then if you're new to Canvas, you'll notice at the very left, there are these you'll see where some of them crossed out. The last thing I would encourage you is to adjust your navigation. so that the kiddos only have a very few items to see. And you can do that in your settings at the very, very bottom. And at the very top, you would go to navigation right here. And you can adjust this space so that students only have a very few items to go to so that their anxiety level is very low, okay? So build everything in modules. Now, we're gonna wrap up. I know it's already 10:15, like time has gone really super fast, and I apologize. Like I said, this is kind of a high level overview, not necessarily like a push button kind of thing, but we wanna encourage you that if you are building in Canvas, number one, you should always be building your content in modules. And just to share some of those best practices with you as you're getting going. Now we are going to, I'm gonna share with you in the chat right here. There's a plus, there's a little evaluation there. Oh, sorry, it only went to Michaela. There's an evaluation there that we're being asked to share with people. So if you would share your thoughts there. I did have individuals that had asked about changing the mark as done. So if you're still here, Amy, I will hang out for just a few minutes and I'll show you that as well. If you don't care, I don't mind hanging out and showing you. But for everybody else, it's 10:15. If you want to jump off, I'm just going to show Amy one thing really quick. She had a question, but thank you for joining me. Sorry, this was fast and furious, but hopefully you walked away with a good thing few things as you start your build in Canvas. Like I said, always start with modules. That's the backbone of Canvas. So thanks for joining me today. Be sure to grab that evaluation in the chat before you take off. And Amy, are you still here? Would you unmute yourself?
Yes,